Kate, what is one of the most powerful questions that you're asking right now in your practice to help people value more about the emotional wealth that they're trying? And that's another term I think that's lovely in what you use is that we undervalue the emotional value of the farm transition. So, what kinds of questions do you find helpful to start those conversations?
I guess the critical question is, and there's no way to ask it with a soft landing, is just clearly, what
Mm.
do you want?
Hmm.
So I'll ask Gen Legacy, and I know you ask a similar thing to the founders. So, what do you want to be the outcome of this entire process? What do you want for yourselves over the next 20, 30 years, however long you might be on this earth? And the other
Hmm.
question I like to ask is, how do you know? So we often hear about a lot of assumptions, and I'll say, well,
Hmm.
how do you know? And then my next question I like to ask, well, have you asked them?
Mm.
Um,
And the head drops.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And oh no, that's your job. Like ownership is also about um, the structures and how the business is structured and the transfer
Hmm.
processes. And so this is the piece where I would there be after doing those first 5 bits of the puzzle, I would be saying to people, "Now this is the time to go to your, accounting and legal experts
To
to get
start
those."
working on the tactics.
Yeah,
Yeah.
rather than
But
starting
you've
big.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It's number 6 out of 7. It's not the
yeah,
first thing.
yeah.
Welcome to the Farm Family Harmony podcast. I'm Elaine Fraze, Farm Family Coach, here with another episode full of transition tips, tactics, and sometimes hard truths to get harmony on your farm.
Hello, welcome to the Farm Family Harmony podcast. And I'm super excited today because I'm visiting with my new friend, Dr. Kate Burke, who is from Down Under. So, Kate, I'll let you introduce yourself first because you've had a very um, colorful career of all kinds of experience. So, how do you like to introduce yourself these days?
Hi, Elaine. Thank you, and thank you everybody who's listening. Yes, I guess, I'll start at the beginning. I was a farm kid from, like lots of people that have been on your podcast, and ended up in a career off farm. It's with an agricultural science degree, a couple of degrees, and then morphed into consulting after some time in research and teaching. So I was an agronomist. I think you might call them agrologists in your part of the world, for a long time, then had some time in corporate agriculture. And now for the last 10 years, I've been working as running my own business called Think Agri, where I'm really passionate about putting more thought into agriculture and really helping farms and families think better, prosper more, and stress less. And you can't do anything in family farming without thinking and talking about succession. So that's where I landed here.
Right. And you've just written a new book, which I had the privilege of reading a couple of months back, and I took tons of notes. So my conversation is going to be niggling your mind, so to speak, and helping you just get your message across. So the book is called Succession: Future Proofing Your Farm, and future proofing is not a common expression that we would use in Canada, but it's definitely about what the future of your farm is going to look like. So the first thing that you said that I wrote down in my notes, Kate, was start with family, not farm, not forms. What do you mean by that?
Well, what I see in Australia in the attempts to deal with succession is that there's a tendency to go straight to the instruments. So things like
Yes.
legal matters, wills, estates, and and things like business structures. And so there's this wanting to go straight to putting something down on paper. And quite often we miss a step, what I call the pre-planning step of actually thinking about what we really want, what we need, and what our families need.
I asked you, Kate, about start with family, not farms, and not forms. And um, your book is also very good, I think, because you deal so much about people and conversation. So you also have some training in what is called ACT therapy. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so ACT therapy is acceptance commitment therapy. So it's a type of psychological therapy that works on helping people to accept the reality that they're in, and then use their values to then commit to doing something about it, and then
Mm-hmm.
practicing that. So it's based on around a lot on the scientific and you know psychological use of the term mindfulness, rather than the
Okay.
mindfulness just being meditation. So that real mindfulness of being in the present moment. And I got into that through a personal experience, and then I realized from this personal experience that this had a lot of application in the work I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I, you know, given that I come from a technically trained background, very good at working out how to make money out of plants and animals, and not a lot of training in the science of people, I was really I realized I needed to do a little more work on that.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things I really enjoyed about your book is how powerful your questions are. So the one that was close to when you were describing your ACT therapy, getting people to, um, have acceptance and commitment as part of the way they show up. You said, "What do land and community mean to you?" And you, in your book, call the founders, what I call the founders, you call them Generation L. Then you have Generation A, which are the active farmers. And then you have Generation C, which are the connected ones, the ones that are off farm but still have a relationship to the farm. So, Kate, what is one of the most powerful questions that you're asking right now in your practice to help people value more about the emotional wealth that they're trying? And that's another term I think that's lovely in what you use, is that we undervalue the emotional value of the farm transition. So, what kinds of questions do you find helpful to start those conversations?
I guess the critical question is, and there's no way to ask it with a soft landing, is just clearly, what
Mm.
do you want?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll ask Gen Legacy, and I know you ask a similar thing to the founders. So, what do you want to be the outcome of this entire process? What do you want for yourselves over the next 20, 30 years, however long you might be on this earth? And the other
Mm-hmm.
question I like to ask is, how do you know? So we often hear about a lot of assumptions, and I'll say, well,
Mm-hmm.
how do you know? And then my next question I like to ask, well, have you asked them?
Mm.
Um,
Then the head drops.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And oh no, that's your job.
Well, no, because it's not my life, it's your life. So what do you
Yeah,
really want?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
am known for asking annoying questions, and I guess that's the one link all the way through my career in the various aspects of it. I've been known as being a good question asker, and I think if
Well, I yeah, we won't go down the track of saying what you wanted the real title of your book to be, but you did tell me privately. And I would say, Kate, in the time that I've shortly known you, you're very clear and you're very direct. And Brene Brown, who's a famous podcaster here in North America, says being clear is kind. And so one of the other phrases that you talked about is understanding why people feel that way. You call it cognitive empathy. Your business is called thinkagra.com. So how do farmers have to shift their thinking in order to have these robust conversations then? What do feelings have to do with all this business stuff?
Well, I just think of it really. There you go. I'm using the word think.
Yeah, that's okay. That's your
To,
word.
to, yeah, yeah. To me, it's pretty logical. So it's humans who make the decisions. It's humans who go out and get on the
Mm,
tractor and decide which field they're going to plant today, and it's humans who decide who gets the farm or who doesn't get the farm and where to spend their money. So, and humans think. So if our thinking
yeah.
machinery isn't in good condition, then all the actions that we do just intuitively and subconsciously, they may not be the best actions if we're under pressure. So to
So
me,
I
oh,
just heard it. Sorry,
gee,
oh,
we're having a hell of
that's
a
okay.
time here. I'll
That's all right.
put the
We're
phone in
being
again.
really real. It's
Oh
it's
my
okay.
goodness, this is terrible. This is not my regular form. I've just had to pull that curtain down a tiny bit because the sun's shining
Yeah,
in.
you're getting too hot.
Yeah.
So
Right.
you said we need to be thinking machines and do that better as well. Okay.
This would have to go down as the world's worst podcasting guest experience for you, I reckon.
It's okay. It's
Oh,
okay. It's okay. I have notes and I am very present with you.
I'll just have to
There you
turn the
go.
phone off. I'm so sorry about all this.
That's all right. It's in the morning for you. This is your busy time.
Yeah, and it's funny how Tuesdays are often busier than other days.
Yeah.
I guess people get themselves organised on a Monday and then go bang on Tuesdays. Right, where were
So
we?
let's
Cognitive
let's
empathy.
yeah, so let's rewind the tape here to back to cognitive empathy.
Sure.
And you said, that we have to understand that people are very important because that's where decisions are made. And that's the thinking machinery on the farm, which is your people. And I found this very interesting because you made this comment about the different stages of being the intern, the manager, the mentor, and the elder. And you said the most difficult part of the transition is between the man or woman going from being the mentor to the elder. And I heard something today I'd never heard before, which I want to relay to you, Kate, is that in the succession research, lots of traction and action till the founders or the legacy geners in their early 60s. But then it's like dropping off a cliff. Like everything kind of shuts
Mm.
down and stops. And is that what's happening in between that shifting from mentor to elder? It's that emotional pattern of you call it waiting and then working, but then wondering what's the time to let go. Is that what's happening when in that legacy generation? What is it
Oh,
from your experience?
I think it's about self-worth and about
An
identity.
identity, maybe?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so much. So my father was, proudly identified as a farmer to the day he died. And he said when he was
Mm.
in rehab after having a stroke, the physical therapist asked him, when did you retire, Mr. McCormick? And he said, farmers never retire. And and
Mhm.
then he passed away a few weeks later. So I think it's about that identity, and underneath that is about their worth, because they know they're good at it. And well, what will they be good at? And they're not needed anymore. It's that's the sort of angst I see. And I also see for the first time, possibly for 30 years or 40 or
Mhm.
50 years, a lack of alignment between the two partners. So, and I know you've
Yes.
talked about this, where the female partner is ready to let go and check out, and the male partner isn't. So all of a sudden they're not on the same page, and they've been on the same page for a long, long time, and so it's this really weird time, and then that then permeates down to the next generation because they're seeing their parents unhappy. And it's hard to
Right.
work in an environment where, that the older generation all of a sudden aren't happy, and it's like, well, they're our mum and dad. What's going on there? So it's quite
Well,
unsettling.
right. And so you've talked about that generation, the action, what you call the A generation. And what you said is that the Generation A learns that leadership isn't granted, it's earned through trust, consistency, and emotional steadiness. And if the founding generation, if the legacy generation, as you call them, has lost emotional steadiness because they're fighting with their partner in the marriage and in the business because they don't agree on what the future should look like, then you've got a bit of a mess. And then
Yeah.
you show up. And then Kate, you show up.
Yeah. And ask hard
and I know
questions.
farmers love to fix things. So when you show up and they say, "Well, Kate, we only have one time to do this and to do this right." So, Kate, tell us what to do. What are you going to say to them?
I'm going to ask them more questions. I'm going to ask them what
Yeah,
they
you're just
want.
going to keep
And what I do ask is back to ACT. One of the big learnings I came from that work is to think about choice points and to think about
Okay.
towards moves and away moves, and that's often the shifter.
Right, which
I'll say to the founder, "Okay, what do you want?" And they'll say, "We want grandchildren at our table at Christmas." And I'll say,
okay.
"Righto, so you stalling on building this new house in town and shifting into town, is that taking you closer to having grandchildren at your table at Christmas or further away from that?" And that's usually it's just a really simple concept, and they get it, and you get a shift. I've seen it work so many times. Is this a towards move or away move? But you can't do that
That
unless.
sounds like
Sorry, you go.
it sounds like my friend Shelley Rose Chervais, who wrote the book Words That Change Minds, NLP master, right? And
Yes.
she told me very long ago, farmers tend to have very much away behavior. They're always fixing things and moving away and solving problems, but they have a much harder time when you ask them, what do you want a good day to look like on the farm when you're 60 and 70 and 80? They don't seem to be able to move forward. They're much more away. So that's a great way of asking the question, how is that helping you get closer to your grandchildren?
Yeah,
Right?
and it's
Which is towards behavior, moving towards something that's good and is more appealing than staying stuck in the paddock that you don't want to leave.
and the away behavior, I get the away behavior. I totally get it, because we're always fighting against something. We're fighting against the elements. We're fighting against, so we're protecting
Mhm.
our farm and our survival mechanism, against declining terms of trade, all these things outside of our control. So we're often we're sitting in defense mode the whole time, and then when you get to be asked to switch to offense mode, it can be quite confronting. So unless you're a really good,
Yeah.
offensive
Yeah.
player, so I guess that is
Right.
our guide as coaches, isn't it? To help them sort of
Right.
work out where they need to be on the field, and then make the most appropriate moves on the sporting
You
field.
also have a deep back Yeah, you also have written other books, Kate, and you have a deep background in finances and farm management, which I think is super foundational for having good conversations around transition. And you talk about succession being like a weaving process, with the warp being financial clarity and having strong management and good leadership. But the other part weaving back into that is all this emotions and heart stuff and memory. So you came up with a saying that expectations are really, really paramount. How do you pull that thread? How do you pull apart that weaving in the succession process of finding out and getting clear about people's expectation? What what tools besides questions do you use for that, or how does that show up in your conversations?
It's again, we talked about clarity, and we can't be
Mm-hmm.
clear if we don't understand what someone expects. And often the emotions come from unmet or unclear expectations or mistaken
Expectations. Yeah.
expectations.
Mhm.
So that's why it's so important. And I think just going back to the emotional thread and the conversation before about emotion, I don't think I answered that particularly well. As humans, we're emotional. It's a signal. It's data. So we were led down a path for since industrialization that to be good
Mhm.
at business, emotions didn't matter. But we know now, we know now that that's not true.
Yay, shout it from the rooftops.
And like Mark Crowley, one of my favorite podcasters, and his work and Lead from the Heart, he was ahead of his time. But really good businesses are emotionally intelligent. They may not
Mhm.
know it, but they're actually good at dealing with people, good at understanding and managing themselves. So if we're to just keep going down this path of, well, emotions need to be kept to one side, and we're going to be in this conversation in our best clothes, chatting at a professional, calm level, and not acknowledging our emotions, we're not necessarily being true, and we're not being true to
Right.
ourselves. So the professionals that are guiding these families, they need to, um, and the good ones are really good at it, but it's so important that if we're getting straight answers or certain answers, to try and drill in and tune in and use your own observation. Are they telling us the truth, or are they telling us what they think they need
Yes.
to say in this environment? And I
Or
guess
what
it's
you want, what you suppose other people want you to hear, right?
yeah, and
Yeah, pretending. Yeah.
I guess that's what led me down this path was seeing really strong businesses and strong families that I thought had this stuff sorted out in spades, and then
Mm,
watching some collateral damage occur because when the instruments were put in place, some of the issues weren't actually raised or resolved.
right.
And I just kept
So it's a
seeing that
Band-Aid approach.
again. So I was determined if I was going to work with families that I wanted them to raise the issues that weren't resolved. And I may not be able to resolve them, or in fact, I won't, but they will have some difficult conversations that then make sure the instruments they put in place are going to work for them.
And you've used this acronym in your book, CARE, which stands for CARE, which means listen to understand, gently lead people into activity, have resolution, like you said, of those issues and timelines for accountability, and then making sure that you pick up on the signals of the feelings and the emotion. So where I want to go now, Kate, is you have this future framework, and it's 7 points, which is great because 7 apparently is the number of completion in
Well, there you
Hebrew.
go.
But the first one says perspective. How do you find out more about a person's perspective? Because that's also a very positive conflict behavior, is putting yourself in the other person's shoes. What's your
Yes.
favorite question for digging into perspective?
What do you want and why do you do it? I
Ah,
keep
there you
going,
go. Okay.
I keep going
Yeah.
back to purpose.
Yeah.
Um, you know, no, it's, it's astounding in agriculture that most people, when I ask them that, they say that's the first time I've been asked that in my life.
Wow. Yeah. After 40 years.
Yeah, no one's ever asked them what they want, we just morph into these things.
And how long, Kate, does it take them to answer that? Because when I've asked farmers that, they'll say, well, Elaine, I don't know. I said, well, I've got time. I'm sitting here. I'll just sit with you for a while.
Yeah,
How long does it typically take for them to give you an answer?
uh, a long time. What I tend to do is get them to think about it and write it down, and then
Mm,
we'll talk about it. I'll give them all the time they need,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it could be days, could be months, could be weeks,
yeah. Which
could be
is why
minutes.
succession gets stuck, right? Because
Yeah.
those questions are foundational to having, like you say, a good foundation for everything else to be thought through well and to build a good foundation on. What about attachment? What are they attached to in terms of a future framework?
This is really important. This is the one that gets missed and that I'm really um, passionate about, because it's that attachment to the farm, to the legacy, to the community. But it's not just the on farm people or the people like the founders, although the incumbents. This is anyone who's stepped foot on that farm can have an attachment to it. And if you grew up on it,
Yes.
um, and it really often gets completely missed, because when the founder generation is sitting with their lawyers or their accountants that they may have had a professional relationship, those professionals, may not even know the name of the other children, and
Right.
and
Or
it
what
just
they're
doesn't
doing.
get discussed. It's just discussed as a business matter,
A
and
transaction.
yeah, it's very transactional. And then so um, there's only one perspective being put forward, and a lot of that perspective could be formed on assumptions rather than actual. The old assumption that oh, Josephine, she won't be coming home because she's an accountant, or Joseph, he's a bookworm, so I can't see him milking the cows. So I'm really passionate about making sure they cover off on that, and then what that means for people.
Hmm. And after attachment, you say function. Function of what for this framework?
This is function of the family and also function of the
Ah,
team. So
okay.
how do because often this is a bit we skip too. So we try to go straight to business viability, and often if a family's not functioning well, it may not make sense to try and have two siblings working together.
Oh, you mean you don't want to force two brothers to work together, do you, Kate? Boy, I
And
like you. So do half the people listening to it. Go, Kate, go. Yes. Why did they force us to work together?
yeah, there's yeah. I can't even answer that because
Hmm.
I've got four brothers that might listen to this. And two of them
Okay.
have farmed together
This
for
is
a
not
long
about
time.
Kate. This is not about Kate. Oh, your brothers have farmed together for a long time. Well, that's
Like
good.
two,
I
two
have
of the
brothers here that are.
two of the four, and now I have one nephew's farming with his father, and who knows what will happen, whether there'll be two more brothers farming together. But it's a common thing, though,
Yeah,
isn't it?
but
It's
it's. I wrote a whole blog on it. It's called "And I Have a Brother Who," because I was sitting in a circle of high performing farmers one day in California with a company that had brought them there for a special reward. And we never got we it took us 90 minutes to just get through this whole thing of the function, as you're saying, of not functioning well with a sibling in business. And some people will just push it away and say, "Oh, they'll have to work it out." Well, no, maybe you should give them the opportunity to function as separate entities and have their own things and not force people to be in situations that they don't want to be in.
or if they do want to be in it, because it's um the potential wealth and the
And the
future.
synergy and the sharing equipment and sharing
Yeah,
resources and da
yeah.
da da.
If they do want to be in it, it's just an acknowledgement that they need to be committed to setting aside the sibling rivalry and working out how to function together. Um, and function and I've seen some great partnerships with very different siblings, but they've worked well together. They've worked out their niche, and it all
And their skill
it can go
sets.
quite well, but they still need an
Mhm.
exit plan. I think
Yeah.
that's probably my thing with siblings is, yep, let's start farming together, but think about the exit plan 20 years before you need it.
Yeah, exactly. In those really good, well-written and signed shareholder agreements and partnership agreements. What about, okay, number 4 is performance, future framework for performance.
So this is about the farm performance and the financial performance of the farm and the production performance of the farm. And essentially, my first book, Crops, People, Money and You, The Art of Excellent Farming, sets out frameworks for what the evidence tells us that drives farm performance. And it's a mix of
Mm,
all those things: good management skill, good financial acumen, and good productivity. And
and
being able to,
timeliness, doing things. Yeah.
yes, all of those things. So often if people come to me to want to talk succession, and I can see straight away there's an enormous performance gap, there needs to be some tough conversations.
Mhm. Oh, but this is such a nice place to live. And farming is such a good lifestyle. We don't really have to be profitable.
Well, that's right.
Okay, Charlie, you're farming a different farm than I am. That's just not going to work for you, for everybody. Yeah. So
Yeah,
again, that's perspective, I guess.
I think our challenge is and in Australia it's challenging because in my field, which is essentially grain farming, our grain season runs closer to a calendar year, but our financial
Mm,
reporting for the government is on a July to June year. So
yeah,
basically, we're
broken.
reporting on grain on sales from one year and costs from another. So it can be
Yeah.
difficult for people to really understand how profitable they are or aren't.
Hmm.
Therefore,
Yeah.
there tends to be, quite often this farm won't be viable because blah, blah, blah. So we can't bring in the next generation. And if they're just looking at their accounting figures from a tax perspective, um, they may be underestimating their actual potential profitability, and that's often the
Hmm.
piece. I don't want people to assume that the farm's not viable for another entity to join the business. I want them to know, and I guess this is a challenge for the accounting consultants, is to make sure that they're helping their farmers really understand their production profitability, as
Cost of
opposed to,
production.
yeah,
Hmm.
and also whether
Hmm.
they're actually truly making a margin as opposed to just looking at it from in the financial reporting framework.
Right. Then you've got strategy. What's the best strategy for a future framework?
Well, to actually think about strategy for starters, and rather than just being busy and doing, um, those farmers in Australia that are making twice as much money as the average farmer are good strategic thinkers, whether they know it or not. And having time thinking about um, the future 3 to 5 years to 20 years, and just having one eye on the future is, some people are just intuitive of that and they have the strategy, it's all in their head. But when you're bringing in extra people to the business, you actually need to stop and think and discuss this stuff. And I joke, I often joke when I'm talking about strategy, I don't care whether it's written on a jam tin or
Yeah.
a beer box, as long as something is written down about what's important to them, what do they want, and where do they want to be, what their desired outcome is, and then how do they get there. You know, it doesn't have to be a 35-page document.
Document. So simple is not always wrong. Less can be more.
Less can be more, particularly I think in farming. We are so busy, and there's so much going on. We just need really clear outcome focused actions to think about.
Mm. Ownership, which is key in terms of how people feel about legacy and their attachment to land and transferring wealth without the fear of failure. What's part of your ownership framework, Kate?
So I guess this is I see ownership as an instrument, like, and also as an outcome. There's a
Okay.
friend of mine's father used to say, names on titles wins. And
Ah,
and so I think we all want to own something and own land. And my personal story is I went and bought a block of land at 50, and then sort of
okay.
felt complete because I
Felt that
owned.
that you were secure. You had your feet on the ground, literally.
Well, yeah, I mean, we owned housing, like, um in towns and things like that, but it was more an emotional buy, if I'm perfectly honest, in that
Mm,
then I could say I was a farmer because I owned some farmland, because I didn't get that opportunity being the youngest of 6 and being a female. In this context of the framework, ownership is also about, um, the structures and how the business is structured, and the transfer
mhm.
processes. And so this is the piece where I would there be, after doing those first 5 bits of the puzzle, I would be saying to people, now this is the time to go to your, um, accounting and legal experts
To
to get
start
those
working on the
right.
tactics.
Yeah,
Yeah.
rather than
But
starting
you've
with
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. It's number 6 out of 7. It's not the
yeah,
first thing,
yeah, yeah.
right?
But when
But
when
then
people
your dad
sorry, you go.
sorry, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
When when,
When
um,
people
when people inquire about, doing, you know, this work, this is usually their first inquiry. I was wondering if you could give us some information on what's the best structures we should have. And
Yeah.
I'll politely say, well, no, I can't, because that's not my area of expertise. But I can help you to make sure that you know what you want, so then you get the best structures that suit your circumstances.
And also once they know from you, Kate, and the conversations they have with you, building that foundation of perspective and attachment and function and performance and strategy, then their conversations, their tactical conversations with lawyers and accountants are much more focused and concise, which saves
Yeah.
them a pile of money as well, because they've already done the clarification of expectations of all the other things
Mm.
to make sure that they're all working towards the same vision, what you would call outcome or vision that they want for the business and the family going forward. But the last one, you actually used the R word. You used retirement framework, and according to your father, he was never going to retire. He died after his stroke, unfortunately, and that's how he went off into the sunset. But um, how do you want to be remembered is one of your questions, and tell me more about that.
I really believe that our careers, and even if it's farming, something you've been born into, and Dad lived in the same house for 84 years and 10 months, and then died on his
Hmm.
85th birthday.
Wow.
I I think it's so important that we remember that people people's interest in, they love us for who we are. They don't love us because we're a farmer or an
Of what we
accountant
do.
or a teacher. And so that's why I asked that question. And it's a confronting question. So, nobody wants to talk about dying. And no, these are tough questions. And the R word is, well, there's only one more step. But the reality is somebody's going to have to pay for you to remain on this earth for another 20 years as your function as a farmer declines. And so we need to talk about, what you refer to as your needs in those last 20 to
Hmm.
30 years.
As you age in place on this farm or in this community.
Exactly. It doesn't matter
Yeah, and
where you're going to be. It costs
no, and
money.
I'd be curious to know in Australia what you're putting on your spreadsheets for the cost of long-term care, because I just spoke recently for Iowa State University at their beginning farmers conference on transition, where they had a speaker on long-term care, and it was identified, Kate, as a huge risk factor for American farms. You know, one person, one founder, one legacy person could cost $150,000 US for care. And if both mom and dad were in care, that would be a 300,000 US dollar hit to the farm. And so this is again something that is a very emotional topic, but needs to be planned for and strategized for, about what are we going to do for cash flow to help out mom or dad, or even the active generation if something happens to them in terms of a disability, you know, to keep people in good care situations. So I did a podcast way long time ago that people can look at, and it's about facing your mortality, and it's had 5 views, which is horrible. I looked at it today, Kate, and you're laughing. But you see, you're exactly right. People don't want to talk about the fact that they do have an expiry date. They just don't know what date it is going to be.
Yeah.
And the fact that you know your dad died on his 85th birthday. My mother died of an asthma attack a month before her 66th birthday. She never saw a 66. And so I just want to say thank you. And I'm going to sort of start towards wrapping up here, but you and I could talk for hours. You said we're emotional humans, and um, we have to use our thinking when we make business decisions. And I just think it's really great. People can replay this podcast. They can remind themselves of your framework. But I think that the thing that you said is start with family, not with forms, and get really, really clear on what people want and what they want the outcome to look like. So where can people find your book,
So,
Succession, Future Proofing the Farm?
on my website, which is the 3 W's, and then thinkagri.com.au. So don't forget to put
Mm-hmm.
the .au on the end. And there's a section in there that says Kate's books. And
Right.
so it's available through there. And we haven't got this one on audio yet, but my first book, Crops, People, Money and You, is available on Audible.
On Audible.
Yeah.
Good. I also read a couple of your posts and videos on LinkedIn. So you're Kate Burke, Burke, on LinkedIn. Actually, you're Dr. Kate Burt, but there's more than one Dr. Kate. So you're
Yeah.
Kate Burke on LinkedIn. And I just think that's another really smart thing to do, is to just um, drop in once in a while and see what you're up to, but also to hear your little video clips on LinkedIn too, because they're very poignant and they're very clear and they're very concise, Kate. And so I'm just really happy to have some acquaintance with you, and had the joy of reading your book very thoroughly and taking tons of notes. And I'm going to quote you often on some of your one-liners for how concise you are. So of all the things that we've talked about today in terms of future-proofing your family farm, future-proofing your farm, which is the name of the book, what's the most important thing you want folks to remember?
Just remember that the word "and," that we can have a really profitable business, and we can care about our family, and we can reach a solution. And it takes commitment and effort to do it, but it's possible.
Mm.
And
So
if I
I
can just one more
yes, and okay.
there's also a
Okay.
YouTube channel. I forgot to mention that's probably the most accessible, is to go and check
Okay.
out the YouTube channel. Think Agri Insights, or if you just Google Kate Burke, Think
Okay.
Agri and YouTube, you should come across it. There's a couple of bits and pieces on there about the succession, and I'm in the process of putting more on every couple of weeks on that at the moment on this topic.
Good. Yeah. Good. Well, we know we have a good audience in Australia and a good audience in North America, and people from South Africa and Ireland and all over the world. And folks, I
Fantastic.
think we can all agree that the way that people think, feel, act, and what they want and need has similarities no matter what your culture of origin is. And I have a new thing here, Kate. It's my Riverside podcast. I just want to see if I can get this to work here. No, maybe not. I was just going to give you the cheering sound. Oh, didn't work. Anyway, I wanted to clap and cheer. We're working across major time zones. It's Monday for me. It's Tuesday for you. And really thank you for giving us the gift of your time today. And so, folks, we'll call that a wrap for Farm Family Harmony podcast today. But there's a reason why we call it Farm Family Harmony, because as Kate said in her talk today, people just want to know if they can see their grandchildren around the Christmas table. And we know that estrangement is affecting more than, apparently now the stats are as high as 25% of families. And that means that there's a disconnect in communication and people aren't seeing things from the same perspective. So please reach out to Kate. If you're in Australia, reach out to us and let us know how we can help you discover to find out better things for your family and make good choices, because ultimately it is your farm, it's your family, and it's your choice. And as Dr. Kate Burke might say, you get to decide how you future-proof your farm. So we'll see you next time. Thanks so much, Kate. Bye for now.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.